I'm Brad Lamech in Los Angeles. To you, wherever you are on the planet, on the World Wide Web, thank you for joining us. Segment 3, Inside the Business of Acting with Tony Award-winning actor, Mr. Hal Linden. How delightful to have you with us, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Harold Lipschitz is how it started out, right? And so let's talk about...
See, if it was today, I would probably still be Harold Lipschitz.
That's true. You could have kept it today.
Nowadays, you could do it, but not when I was...
Should we see what you know about Linden, New Jersey?
Linden, New Jersey was the gas storage tank that I passed on I was doing a gig in Lakewood, New Jersey. It was a resort town. I did a Christmas gig there. And I was coming on my way back, and I was about to go to college. And I figured if I was going to change my name, it was going to be between high school and college. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. And we passed through Linden, New Jersey, and the tank was at its fullest. You know, it's all the way up.
Yeah.
So it said Linden on it in 3-story letters. I said, okay. I'm going to start with billing. That's my billing. And that's
now, were you with your brother at that time, or were you traveling? Was your brother?
No. My brother was, interestingly, he was about to go to college too. He had from high school had gone into the Air Corps Orchestra. He was a violist, and so we were both going to change our name as we started our new college career.
Did he as well?
Yes. Yes,
Linden.
He lived.
Actually, I Googled Linden, New Jersey. There's all kinds of this. It's
I don't know that much about Linden, New Jersey.
You should Google it.
I just know the gas tank.
I think that's very funny.
That's all I know about it.
I was very curious about that. Tony Award. The Rothschild. Broadway.
Big moment.
What did that represent for you?
Well, I had this lucky break to get. The second lucky break was getting into even auditioning for Bells Are Ringing and getting the part and then going on immediately, and then unheard of in those years, I actually acceded to the role when Sidney Chaplin left. Unheard of for an understudy to get, the part.
How on earth did that happen?
I was pretty good. And I guess cheap too.
I guess. Maybe as important.
Maybe as important. I had no name, but anyway, it started my career as a Broadway performer. The next decade was very spotty. A lot of shows, most of them bombs. A lot of inner fortitude. It was during that time that I had 4 children too, so I didn't have all that many choices in terms of what I was going to do. Whatever paid the rent was next, A lot of making ends meet, a lot of...
Tough.
At
time.
This was the tough times, the 60s. Yeah. The whole decade of the 60s, tough. Just trying to earn money. I didn't want to go back to playing the saxophone. I was afraid that I knew I could make a living playing the saxophone, but I wanted to make it in the theater, and I was afraid that if I went back and played the saxophone, I'd get caught in that and stop making a living, and the next thing I know, I'd be back in the music
kind of a rut in that respect.
In a sense, in a rut, So I didn't work as a musician. That was tough. I made money as a jingle singer. I made money doing voices of foreign films.
Dubbing.
And it was called dubbing in those days. That was before there was a lot of material, so other than networks, all these other channels had very little. There was very little material. I used to buy all these cheap foreign films and dub them into English, and you'd see it on channel 13 or 11 somewhere.
It's a living.
It was hard, but it was a living, and I got good at it. I think that's the point. I whatever I did, jingles, voiceovers, Bacchus auditions. I was the king of Bacchus auditions because I could learn a piece of music right away. I could read. So they loved me. It's not a lot of money, but
It's work.
it's work, paid the rent, and and it all stopped the minute I got a Broadway show. Then I devoted myself to the Broadway show. Bomb, back. Another Broadway show, bomb. I don't know how many shows I did in that decade. I must have done a dozen. More than a dozen, probably. Two a year at least.
Were you getting all of your own work at that time, or at this point did you have people?
By the time I did Bells Are Ringing, I had an agent.
Had an agent.
And I was getting auditions, but in those days, leading men on Broadway in Broadway shows were either movie stars or television stars.
Well, it's a lot like now.
Yeah.
It's come full circle.
That's where they came from. And those of us who fought our way up through the ranks were very few and far between. You know, it was me and Jerry Orbach and Len Cariou and, 4 or 5 of us who were the leading men on Broadway if you needed just somebody to do the job. If you needed a name, it was somebody else. It was the star of some television show or something, you know.
How interesting now that here you are, a working actor with a wonderful name from television, back in theater.
Well, I always, the minute I could, theater was always it for me. So the minute there was anything that had any interest to me, that's why I did Cabaret on Broadway, and I did Rappaport and Sisters Rosenzweig later, in my career.
But it's a different kind of experience, isn't it? I mean,
it's also where the soul was, right?
Yeah. It's also kind of fun to start it at the beginning and then finish it at the end, isn't it?
That's why I'm doing
the Sunshine Boys.
I'm finally old enough to play Willie Clark.
You like the role?
Oh, have you ever seen the Sunshine
Yes,
Boys?
sure.
It's a magnificent. I think it's a wonderful play. It's a very touching play.
Yeah.
I mean, the jokes were always there. The minute we sat around the table and read the script, we were hysterical. Neil Simon knows how to write a funny play, but he also wrote a very touching play about age, uselessness. When the world passes you by, as it did all these wonderful vaudeville performers who had this wonderful technique and wonderful shows, and all of a sudden it was stand-up comics. The world just changed overnight. Listen, that happened to me when big band jazz became Bill Haley and the Comets, and rock and roll took over, and I was like displaced.
Almost like overnight.
Almost, it was overnight. It was. When I went in the Army, you had Woody Herman, Stan Kenton, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Sort of Finnegan was just starting. All the great big band sounds. When I came out of the Army, they were all disbanded, except for I think the Count was still working. That was it. Gone. It was now Bill Haley and the Comets, and eventually, Elvis Presley and people like that.
Well, as I say, the television, too, had become such an important force in its early days as it was growing, and I think maybe that had some kind of influence on this landscape of entertainment.
It could have,
as well.
it could have. Yeah. But I mean, the whole point of becoming obsolete, that's so deep and, in a sense, tragic. It's classic tragedy, becoming obsolete, and that's what happened to Willie Clark. He became obsolete overnight.
So
he's still waiting for the phone to ring to do a commercial or,
So how do you think smart actors, as they go along the journey of their careers, keep from being obsolete? Clearly you've made, look at the choices
Willie
you've made.
Clark was obsolete because his comedy became obsolete. His act became obsolete, Yes, you have to keep up with what's going on and watch other people and still learn from other people. To this day I'm learning from from whoever I work with.
Not be afraid to take a risk.
Not be afraid to take a risk. No. Not be afraid to flop. You know, I had those 10 years of pretty much flop after flop after flop.
Well,
in the
now
60s.
that you brought that up,
You know how to handle.
you've learned.
Yes,
You adapt.
But I learned in the process. I worked with some wonderful performers in the process, and wonderful choreographers and directors, and I didn't give in to the fact that we were not going to make it into New York because we were going to close in Philadelphia. I used to sit up at night and say, what if they changed this? And I would rewrite the scenes myself to see and see how they came up, where they went.
Mm-hmm.
Not always the same, but keep at it. That's all.
Yeah.
Keep at it.
And now with the Sunshine Boys, I mean, people folks who are watching us who aren't familiar with Los Angeles theater, which is just thriving. People sort of think of New York as being sort of the place in America for theater, but there's so much fabulous theater being done here. You are performing this wonderful show in a small theater, which introduces an intimacy factor that in a way replicates kind of sitting home watching it on TV. It's right there. What's that like?
That first row is only about 4 feet away from me.
Yes. What does that feel like as an actor? Do you have an awareness that they're there? Or?
Sure you have an awareness.
Oh, you do?
Of course.
Does it change the performance, do you think? You know, for you?
Acting is the same. Whether you're doing classic acting, whether you're doing comedy, drama, television, movies, the technique is the same. But the proscenium arch changes. When you're in a musical and a proscenium arch this big, don't forget the size of the proscenium arch. When you're on television, the proscenium arch is this big. Don't forget where the proscenium arch is. So that's what changes. The size of choices, still have to make the choices, but the size might change.
The subtleties are magnified.
Subtleties are magnified. You can play more subtle. But it's the same technique.
Yeah.
It's still acting.
That's, I think, some of the best advice to an actor at any stage that I've ever heard.
Well, that's
really.
the best advice. I learned that when I went into television. I must tell you, I was not adept at that. When I did my first Barney, I never forget, we had 400 people, you know, in the audience, and I had a speech that I did, and I turned away from the man, and I did the speech as if it were a proscenium, but doing it to the 400 people. And later on, Danny came and said, that's not where the audience is. The audience is in that little camera there. And we were on you like this, and we're seeing this of you. You learn.
Who knew?
I didn't know. You learn.
You learn.
You learn, that's all. So the whole thing is a learning experience, I'm telling you.
It's interesting, too, because the kids who are, particular kids studying acting or performing arts in colleges and universities all over the world, are learning a lot about theater and live performance, and we need to get them more into also knowing how to adapt for the camera, too, like exactly what you're saying.
And the secret, where's the proscenium arch? How big is it?
It's going to be on the final.
That's the secret. That's the only way to look at it. Where's the proscenium arch, and how big is it? That's why you always say to the director, where are we at? How big is this? And
What's the shot? What's the
director will say, like, up to here. Now I know how big that proscenium arch is. And I'll adapt my performance to that size. If he's that big, I can adapt my performance to that size, too. It's be a little bigger.
And if you had 1,000 people and the person in the last row, if there's only... Yeah.
If you're doing St. Louis Muni Opera,
right,
where there are 6,000 people out there, and you're dying as Don Quixote lying on a pad, and you have to die like this. You can't die the same way you would with a proscenium arch that size.
I love it. I feel like I've had a master class, actually. I thank you for that. Okay. Yeah, see, this is going to be on your final. There'll be a test. We're going to come back with the final fourth segment with actor Hal Linden. And, well, we may even talk about some nuts and bolts stuff that might help you. So delightful. Well, how wonderful that you would come here and share with us your story.
I run off at the mouth occasionally.
No, but this is, please stay.
Okay.
One more. Okay. I'm Brad LeMac in Los Angeles. We're coming back for segment 4 of Inside the Business of Acting. We'll see you then.